Let's look at one of the hardest problems in modern psychiatry: building cognitive resilience and emotional regulation in patients overwhelmed by chronic, high-stress environments. Cognitive resilience is the capacity to maintain healthy psychological functioning and recover quickly from significant stressors. To address this kind of internal chaos, doctors typically rely on standard interventions, such as pharmacological therapies or traditional clinical counseling. But there is a parallel set of tools frequently dismissed by clinicians as purely spiritual or religious artifacts. This applies to culturally embedded practices, specifically ancient mantra chanting. Recent qualitative psychiatric research and hard neurophysiological data directly contradict this bias. Chanting is a highly mechanical, culturally embedded cognitive intervention that can be utilized effectively by modern medicine. We're going to deconstruct the exact neurocognitive mechanics of mantra chanting from first principles. To understand why it works, we have to bridge two traditionally separate fields of study. We will define these fields as qualitative psychiatric coding and electroencephalography frequency shifts. Electroencephalography, or EEG, is a method of recording the electrical activity of the brain using electrodes placed on the scalp to monitor neural behavior. By tracing the data from subjective psychological healing down to objective neurometrics, we can reverse engineer how a repetitive acoustic sound structurally alters the human brain. Recent psychological studies have provided a clear methodology for this, utilizing semi-structured interviews with practitioners of culturally embedded chanting. Researchers applied a strict thematic analysis to isolate these effects, moving the evidence base away from the purely anecdotal. Thematic analysis is a qualitative research method used to identify, analyze, and report patterns or themes within data. The first stage is initial coding, extracting raw interview data to identify base experiences like reduced anxiety or better focus. Next is axial coding, where those raw experiences are measurably grouped into subthemes: psychological well-being and physical relaxation. Practitioners consistently reported a profound increase in present moment awareness and a reduction in cognitive overload. These feelings of heightened emotional control are documented across highly diverse cultural demographics. The qualitative data proves that chanting subjectively works to build resilience, but to trust it clinically, we must identify its structural psychological anchor. In theoretical coding, grouped themes map directly to clinical models. First is mindfulness-based stress reduction, treating stress and anxiety. Chanting forces attention to the present. Second is cognitive behavioral therapy, changing unhelpful behaviors. Here, repetitive vocalization actively interrupts maladaptive stress loops. Cultural embeddedness actually increases patient compliance and resonance compared to more sterile clinical exercises. While the psychiatric model identifies chanting as a structured behavioral anchor, we must also identify the physical engine driving this relief. We now move the focus from the mind to the body, starting with the mechanical act of vocalization and diaphragmatic breathing. The rhythmic breathing required for chanting acts as a mechanical trigger for the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is the main component of the parasympathetic nervous system, responsible for regulating internal organ functions. Stimulating this nerve activates the parasympathetic nervous system, which functions as the body's internal rest and digest network. This activation triggers an endocrine response, suppressing stress hormones like cortisol for up to 48 hours after a single 10-minute session. fMRI evidence supports these findings. Functional magnetic resonance imaging, or fMRI, is a scan that measures brain activity by detecting changes associated with blood flow. These scans show a reduction in activity within the amygdala, the brain's anxiety-related region. Chanting chemically and structurally forces the body out of its sympathetic stress response, preparing the brain for a neurological shift. We find the final proof of this cognitive alteration by using EEG to measure the electrical consequences of this physiological shift. This chart shows raw EEG brainwaves. The beta track indicates stressful cognitive overload. Chanting actively drives output down the spectrum, first into alpha waves indicating relaxed alertness, and finally reaching the theta track, correlating with profound restorative relaxation. Mantra chanting functions as a targeted acoustic tool that physically forces the brain's electrical grid into lower frequency, regenerative states. Subjective feelings of inner peace are the direct psychological manifestations of these shifted EEG frequencies and suppressed cortisol levels. Repeated use of this intervention promotes neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is the brain's ability to reorganize itself by forming new neural connections throughout life. Consistent practice strengthens the neural pathways between the prefrontal cortex, which governs executive function, and the amygdala, our emotional processing center. Chanting treats the acute symptoms of stress while structurally rewiring the brain's architecture for heightened long-term cognitive resilience. The bias that culturally embedded sound practices are unscientific is factually incorrect. Chanting provides a value proposition for clinicians as a highly accessible, cost-effective, and non-pharmacological tool. These practices resonate with diverse cultural identities while providing hard neurobiological benefits, proving the value of cultural competence in modern mental health. By translating ancient sound practices into modern neurobiological data, the psychiatric field can integrate a proven mechanical mechanism for emotional regulation and cognitive health.